So this is the cached jacket animation with the really high solver settings. Small mistakes that I'll fix later, but it looks like that jittery behavior is gone. So it must have been the solver settings. There was some issue over here. It was jittering as the nCloth was acting like it was trapped. Doesn't look bad. Okay, let me get started on the shorts. I'm going to import the shorts, proxy mesh, import, bring it in, do the same thing, assign it the default Lambert shader. Okay, name it with the same naming convention as I did the jacket, jean shorts, nCloth geo. Now I'm going to select it and turn it into an nCloth. Do a quick little test, see what we're looking at. Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to pause, do a Playblast, and see what our simulation looks like with the default nCloth settings. Here it is, just as expected. It's a mess. So I'm going to go in there and start playing around with these settings. So I'm going to go into perspective, go to the start. Now with the shorts, I'm not going to crank up the stretch, compression, and bend resistance to 1000. I want a lot more deformation, especially when the legs are moving. There's supposed to be creases around here, and I kind of want to see them, so I don't want to go too high up. So I'm going to go with like a 500 to start. And since the body already has its friction set, all I have to do is set the friction for these shorts, crank them up to 1, and then I'm going to go with that dampening value of 50 that I went with for the jacket. Or actually no, I'm going to see what happens first with the 500 value and the bend resistance, so I can isolate problems a lot easier. Sorry, the 500 values for stretch, compression, and bend, and the friction of 1, and then later I'll add dampening so I can see exactly what value it's adding to the simulation. Okay, I'll be right back with the Playblast. It's definitely a bit too loose for denim, and I think it will benefit from that damping value to slow it down. But those stretch, compression, and bend resistance values could go a little higher. It's just a little too loose for denim. Not too much though. I think it's moving pretty nicely, but yeah, it's stretching at some parts that just don't look real. But there is another major problem which you can probably notice. It's how the hands are interacting with it. That's a big problem. Let's get into Maya and let me tell you how I'm going to solve it. So I'm going to take us back, go to my perspective camera. I'm going to try to go for something closer. So about 800. Let me see how 800 behaves. And then I am going to crank up. I'm going to set my dampening to 50. I definitely need that. I don't want these loose hanging fabrics, ruptured fabrics flying all over the place. For this issue we're having with the hands, I'm going to resolve it by creating a new collision surface for these shorts to collide with. This body acting as a collider for these shorts that is never really going to go to all these places. It's never going to go all the way down here. It's never going to go up here. It might collide with the hands, but there's a lot of computation happening for collision, and I want to limit that computation to an isolated mesh that is within this region, somewhere from around the belly button to the top of the thigh. If I ever needed the hands to interact with the shorts, I'd be using end constraints. I wouldn't actually want these hands to be touching the shorts in the way they are right now and causing all those weird artifacts and jittery movement. I'd use an end constraint and fake interaction between the end constraint and the shorts. Make it look like the hand is doing it. So let's take this body mesh, hit Control D to duplicate it, Shift P to get it out of the group it's in, solo it, and I'm going to select these faces. Actually, hold on a second, let me clean it up. It was bound. I'm going to unlock all its transforms. I'm going to delete history on it. Freeze this transforms to make sure it has nothing. Okay. Then I'm going to grab the faces that I need to collide with the shorts. This will be really good because it will just speed up the simulation for the shorts. Grab this. I should have turned on symmetry for this. And I'm going to try to go a little lower because the loose hanging fabric does need to collide with the thighs. Not so far down, but maybe about, I'm going to hold down the shift period to grow to about there. That's about as far as the loose hanging fabric needs to collide. I'm going to deselect this because we don't need it to collide. We don't need the shorts to collide up that high. Okay. Hold down Control and click here and then double click to lose. Okay, so that's what I need for the shorts to collide with. So I'm going to go select inverse selection, delete, go. Select this one more time, delete history, freeze transforms. Say this, call this the Clean Shorts Collision Geo. Okay. And I'm going to select it, select the body, go to the rigging menu, go to deform, go to wrap. And this time I'm going to do an exclusive bind because they are the same meshes, they have the same topology. I want every point on the source to control the its respective point on the duplicate mesh, right? Just so we get a perfect approximation, like exact. It mirrors exactly what the body's doing. So I'm going to hit apply, create, and scrub the timeline to make sure it's actually connected. Yes, it's connected. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is turn this, call it wrap, jeans shorts, nCloth collider. Okay, now I'm going to turn it into a passive collider. So I'm going to go to the FX menu and turn nCloth, make a passive collider. Now, the key here, and I want to test to make sure this actually functions, is I'm going to put the shorts on a different collision layer, the shorts and this duplicate proxy on a different collision layer. And the way you do that is up here, you have collision layer. So I'm going to set the shorts to 1. I'm going to take the shorts collision layer that I created and also set its collision layer to 1. But there's one more thing to do now. I have to go into the nCloth solver and tell it what the collision layer range is, and that I think is somewhere underneath. Yes, collision layer range. This is basically what I've done is this body, this top, and this head are on collision layer 0, and so is that jacket that we did previously. This and this are on their own collision layer, but with the nCloth set to a range of 4, it's going to be looking for at least 4 collision layers to try to make a collision with. So you have to reduce this to something, to 1 or something underneath it, right? So if I say 1, then each object is only looking for 1 collision, 1 thing to collide with, and that's fine with me because every single thing on 0 just needs to be looking for 1 thing. This needs to be looking for the jacket, that needs to be looking for the jacket. These are 2 passive colliders, and so these 3 are passive colliders. They shouldn't be interacting with each other. They should be interacting with the cloth, 1 thing, the jacket. and this new one, it should be interacting with just the shorts. I'm going to hit play and see if when the hands do come in contact with the shorts, there's any interaction. If there's no interaction, then that means it worked. Yeah, it didn't work. Okay, let me stop it. Check my values again. This is on collision layer 1. That's on collision layer 1. I'm going to go to this nCloth and set this to a lower number. I think 1. I thought 1 would be the appropriate one to set it to. I'm going to set it to like just something under 1. Try again. It's supposed to work. If it doesn't work, there's another solution, but I would really like this to work because it's better than the second solution. The second solution requires another nCloth solver and an unraveling of most of the work we've done in the shorts. Yep, it worked. Okay, so apparently this number have to be under 0, this collision layer range. Tumble around, make sure. Yes, so now the hands are no longer interacting with these shorts. And like I said before, if I ever need these hands to interact with these shorts, I'd probably use a constraint and not have the actual geometry doing it. And this is also probably calculating a lot faster because this short is only looking for this simple proxy. Okay, so I'm going to do a Playblast since we resolved the hand thing. I'm going to do a Playblast so we can take a look at what the 800 stretch, compression, and bend resistance in conjunction with the dampening value of 50. I want to see how they work. So I'll be right back with the Playblast. Here's the blast. As you can see, the shorts are flying all over the place. And I just realized why. It's because I never set the friction value for the new collision mesh that I created for the shorts. But there's another thing that I noticed that I want to fix with another nCloth feature, and it's how the loose hanging fabric is not really doing a lot of bending. These are really thin strands of fabric, accumulations of them, and they usually sort of whiff through the air. They're very like slow movement. They don't do a lot of overlapping action and making a whole lot of C's and S shapes, but they should be moving a lot loosely. So I think I might resolve that by painting property maps in nCloth. It's a way of weight painting attributes to specific areas. So I'm going to take a shot at it and see how well it works. Let's get back into Maya. I'm going to make those 2 changes. So I'm going to select this, actually select the collision mesh for the shorts, crank up its friction, and then I'm going to select the shorts, and I'm going to go into nCloth. I'm going to say paint properties, and I'm going to start by trying to paint 2 things, or I might just let me do 1 to see if 1 will resolve the issue. I don't think it's the dampening. I think it might be the bend, but if I paint for there to be less bend resistance and it's still not whiffing through the air like what it's supposed to be doing, like a really light thread, then I'll come and try to paint away some of the dampening so it can move a lot more. So I'm going to start with bend resistance, and I'm going to paint, actually sorry, it's supposed to be here. I'm going to paint vertex properties. I don't want to paint texture properties because that saves a texture to file, and I don't like that idea. I don't want any more textures being loaded in for this character. It uses UDIMs and it loads in a lot of textures, so I want to minimize it. And this feels cleaner because it's painting on the vertex and it keeps it within the scene file. You don't have to go looking for a file to load in the property. So I'm going to go to paint vertex properties, and then I'm going to bend options, and it's basically has a full value of 1 for bend. And I'm going to come over here, set it to maybe, actually let me try 0 to see if it is having any impact whatsoever. So I'm going to start with 0. I'm going to go with a replace. First, isolate the shorts. I'm going to go with a replace and paint in a value of 0 for all the loose hanging fabric. so I don't end up painting into areas I don't want to have zero bend resistance. So it's about there. That's another one. So basically what I'm doing is I'm telling it all the white parts have a bend resistance of whatever I have set here, and I think setting it to 0 make sure that these ones don't have that high bend resistance. I don't think it makes them 0. Actually it does. If I wanted them to have a more smaller number, I should have painted a weight of maybe 0.0 something or 0.1. Okay, so that's all the loose hanging fabric. The really short ones, I don't care if they articulate, but these long ones should be wafting through the air. Okay, so that's 2 changes. And I'm gonna blast it and see how it looks. I'll come back when the Playblast is done. All right, so here's the final Playblast. It looks like the loose hanging fabric is doing a lot better with a weighting for bend resistance of 0 painted in for them. The shorts are still flying, not as aggressively as they were, but it's moving a little bit more than it should be if it was denim. So I'm thinking of some strategic areas where I want to apply a point to surface constraint to get it not to shift around her hips so much. I don't want to pin the entire core, just some edge loops closer to the borders to the 3 openings. So let's get back into Maya and let me show you what I have planned. So I'm going to go into perspective cam again. Wind. And I'm going to select, I really like I want this to move. So I'm going to select maybe say, and I definitely don't want these pocket areas to move too much, because really all this stuff is going to be form fitting. And if you remember, I do have pockets that are being controlled by a blend shape driven control system. Sorry, a control driven blend shape system. And I want to be able to open them even after this thing is simulated. So it'll look a lot better if there's not too much folding and stuff happening here. So I do think from up to about here, I might want to see it pinned down, but first let me try. I'm going to try selecting definitely this edge loop. This will help hold it in place. And I feel like the next selection I'm about to make is going to be really messy, because it's of where it's located. You know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to just try going with the edge loops. Yep, that's about a fair selection. It's kind of weird towards the butt area, so I'm going to go get it there. A selection like this would allow the loose hanging fabric that isn't as long to sort of move, which might not be too bad. See what that selected. Okay, that selected that edge loop, so I think I can get rid of this one. I want it selecting over there. Although I do think that I want to keep the butt area on the butt. I don't want too much. You would never see too much creasing there with jeans. I might need to pick something else that makes sure there's not too much movement in the butt area. I'm thinking right along the center line. Actually, that might be a really good idea. I'm going to pick right along the center line after I'm done this loop with this loop selection. This is going to pin it in place because of I'm going to use the spring default setting of the point to surface constraint, but it has a strength value. So if I do ever need a little bit of sliding, and I might do that right now, I might just not max out on the strength so that it just eases up a bit and allows for a little bit of sliding. Not too much, but a good amount. Okay, so those the two ledge loops of the leg have been selected all the way around. Okay. All right, so the last thing I'm going to select is the center line. I think I should be able to make a simple selection by just shift clicking and then double click, and then I'm going to deselect this. I do, as I said before, I do want to see the top part of this move a bit. We'll see if it's a bad idea. If it is, I think it'll be fine. All right, so this central line here, this over here, and maybe even, I guess I'm trying to hold it in place in the parts where the seams. Yeah, I might want to store this selection just in case I want to come back and modify it. But I was also thinking maybe here, this edge loop. So I'm going to store this selection, and then if it turns out this was a bad choice, then I'll come back and you definitely want this loose hanging part sort of pinned in place. It's just not attached to anything. It'll look weird. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to go to my custom menu, go to create sets, quick select set, and add this selection to the shelf, just in case I need to come back, delete that the constraint and redo them. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to now control right click and go to vertices. I think you should still be able to create a point surface constraint by selecting any components, whether faces or edges, but for some reason I'm always paranoid and I always go to the points or vertices. So once the vertices are selected, I'm going to click on my jean shorts collision mesh, and then I'm going to do hold on a second, I may have left out some points. Okay, so that's a good selection. I'll select the jean shorts collision mesh, and I'm going to go to constraints, point to surface constraint. Okay, so yeah, the default setting is spring, and I'm going to do a blast and come back so we can take a look at it. Here we go. It looks like the constraining has now allowed for the introduction of some creases in the core, just to help sell the material. I think it's good. It's a bit much. I was a little, I mentioned something about not wanting creases in the pocket area, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect how the control-driven blend shape works, and it is realistic to see folds there. Now, the folds you're seeing here are not so rich, and I think it's because of the resolution of the shorts. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the resolution of the nCloth mesh. I don't think there's a penalty to pay if I run a smooth operation on it. So I'm going to smooth it just so I get richer folds. But another thing I'm also going to do is, in order to control the folds just so they're not so aggressive, I'm going to reduce the strength of the point to surface constraint just a little. So it's going to allow for a little bit more movement so that these folds are not so strong. So just letting up a little bit should change the intensity of the fold and just reduce it by some amount. Okay, let's get back into Maya so I can try this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, yeah, I'm pretty sure there's no penalty for this. I think you can modify nCloth like this. So I'm going to hold down Shift, click and go smooth. there should be no penalty. I think nCloth is fine with this. And then I'm going to go take this constraint, come down to the strength, and just see what happens when I crank the strength down by, say, half. So 10 for the strength and 5 for the tangential strength. And I'll be right back with the blast so we can see what these two changes have done. Here's the blast. The resolution hike has definitely improved the quality of the loose hanging fabric. I see them animating a lot better, nice shapes. They're looking really good. The one thing I'm seeing that is not too jeans-like is on the back, there's this really small rippling happening over there on the back. It's not too jeans-like. So what I'm considering is going back to my compression, bend, and stretch resistance and cranking them up to about the same thing I did for the jacket. I don't want it to get rid of the nice creasing I'm getting in the front, but I'm hoping that it will reduce the little rippling effect, so by making it resist. But I do think it's close to completion. Just need to fine tune it to make sure the deformation is close to denim. All right, let's get back into Maya. So I'm back in Maya, and I'm gonna make what I believe should be the last couple of edits. I'm gonna set the stretch resistance to the same, stretch, compression, and bend resistance to the same value that the jacket is, and see what the result is. Just want to minimize that rippling. So I'm gonna be back with the blast, see if this is it. Okay, here's what I have. I did a lot more than crank the stretch, compression, and bend resistance to 1000. Let me run through the series of things I did to get this final result. So the first thing I did was disable the first smooth modifier I applied. I realized that the reason I was getting all this granular movement now is because I had added more subdivisions, and this thing now has more points to deform. But by disabling it on the whole thing, I lost the benefit that it provided on the loose hanging fabric. If you remember, the loose hanging fabric started simulating a lot better because of that smooth. So what I decided to do was isolate the smoothing to the loose hanging fabric. So I selected all the faces over there and run another smooth. And I was able to get it just on the loose hanging fabric and leave this alone. The next thing I did was reduce the strength of the point to surface constraints by half. So this was 10 and this was 5, and I reduced them. And this is because I wanted a little bit more movement. And with that movement came a lot more of a looser feel. So I went back into the cloth and cranked up the stretch, compression, and bend resistance to 1200. So that's 200 more than the original plan. And this is what it's giving me. I like it, it looks pretty good. I'm getting a good amount of creasing in the front, just a little bit, not too much. The back is a lot more cleaned up. But the one thing that is happening is the collapsing of the belt line occasionally. You can see it over there. And I have a very nice solution for that. I'm going to use property maps to paint a rigidity value around the belt line. Not too much, but enough that I can modulate it at animation time, because it doesn't collapse all the time. And the times that it does, I want to be able to create a custom attribute to crank up rigidity in the regions where it's collapsing to force it to retain its original shape. So let me go into Maya and show you how I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is select the shorts, go into the nCloth menu, go to paint vertex properties, and I'm going to paint rigidity. And I'm going to start by making sure I flood the entire mesh with a rigidity of 0. I don't want nothing else affected other than this part, this upper part here. So now I'm going to take this upper part and give it a rigidity of, say, 0.4, and then just paint here. Actually, I'm going to go with a 0.5. If it's too much or too little, I can crank up the rigidity setting. So this is just to stop this top part from collapsing. It's just a really hard belt line, and it shouldn't really collapse like that. Okay. So once you do this, you 100% do have to turn on rigidity, or else none of this, it won't recognize any of this. So I'm going to crank rigidity up to 1 for now. And I'm going to take this smooth brush and do a little bit of smoothing with a softer brush. So we have a nice transition. I don't want the transition to be noticeable, but I do want that top area to do its best to hold its original shape. Okay, there it is. So here's the final result. There's not too much more collapsing up there, and all I needed to do was bring it down to a minimum. As soon as I wrap the actual clothing to it, it will be negligible, right? But it's looking good. I like how the ruptured fabric is animating. I like how the actual pants are working out. So I think this would be it. There are some minor penetrations with some of the ruptured fabric and the thigh. I resolved that by either increasing the collision thickness of the body or the fabric at animation time, but it's not a big deal. I'm willing to bet that as soon as I crank up the solver settings, it's going to resolve this. I'm going to get better collisions over there. So let's get back into Maya and let me connect my shorts geometry to this proxy. All right, so I'm going to go to the perspective cam, go to the layers, turn on my jean shorts, and I went over the wrap deformer network to show how all this threading and belt loops are connected. All I have to do is connect this main geometry and the inside of the pockets to my simulation mesh. So I'm going to grab this main jeans, grab my simulation mesh right there. And I'm going to go rigging, deform, wrap deform, edit reset settings, so that I can go with the auto weight threshold just like I did for the jacket. Hit apply. Took a little while to process. I'm going to do the same with the inner pockets. Select them, select my proxy, apply. And the last thing that needs to be wrapped is the ruptured fabric. So I'm going to select that, select my proxy, and apply. Okay. Now I'm going to save and run a quick test just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to hit play. See if everything's going to move correctly. Remember, at the beginning it's going to collapse, and then at around -19, when the body starts moving, everything should be fine. Yep, looks good. I actually forgot one more piece. Over here, this fabric bridge, that also needs to be skin wrapped or wrapped to our proxy. So I'm going to select it, select my jean shorts proxy, go rigging, deform, wrap deform, and we should be good. Fine. Okay, so now everything is connected. Okay, so I'm going to crank up the solver settings, cache out the result, and in the next lesson, when I come back, we get to preview both of them playing together, and I'll close out this course with my final thoughts. I do have a bonus lesson I'm going to do to show you how I'm going to use a transform constraint on this part of the animation where she yanks at the pants, and I'm going to use a transform constraint to show you how I'm going to simulate that action. I'll see you in the next lesson with the solver settings high and this simulation cached so we can scrub it.